This is Freight Master Resources. It is April 25th, 2021. And in today's webisode, I want to talk to specifically carriers about trucking fails. Now, this isn't the probably the kind of trucking fails that you might have expected. It doesn't have to deal with, some sort of a crash or some sort of a F up out on the road, right? What I want to talk to you today about are things that will affect your bottom line, right? Me as a broker, we're an asset-based company, so I understand, sort of both sides of it. But it seems like more often than not lately, when brokering loads, there's things that are missed that could have been easily avoided and save the carrier from deductions on a load. And some of those deductions are things that are spelled out very, very clearly on confirmations. And for instance, if it's an $1,800 to a $2,000 load, a short run, but then you get hit with a $500 to $600-800 deduction, that's really going to affect your bottom line. And so again, today I want to go over some of these things with you, and what you can basically do to avoid them. And this is for you dispatchers out there too, you independent dispatchers. I'll get into all of this and more right after this.
Need to find loads and trucks fast? DAT connects carriers, brokers, and shippers with the most user-friendly load board in trucking. Subscribe for access to the most loads and trucks in the industry, the best freight rates, data, and more. Start finding loads and trucks today.
Okay, I'm back. So we're talking about trucking fails, and things that you can do or things you can avoid that are going to affect your bottom line, right? And I'll probably do another video. In fact, I have kind of touched on this in previous videos in regards to brokers and things that they could be doing to help out carriers. One of the big things that I find are that carriers and independent dispatchers are not reading their confirmations. Now, each confirmation from each broker is different. I mean, unless you've already got a really good established relationship with a broker or a direct shipper, and you're familiar with their rate confirmations. But I've been kind of building my book of business beyond what it was current, previously, and with that has opened up new lanes, and so I've had to start working load boards, DAT, in an effort to work with more carriers, and on some of these, the customer hands down some very, very strict deductions and fees if things aren't followed, right? And this brokers will have these in there as well, even if it's not something that's handed down by the customer. So, excuse me. So things like obviously tarping fees, for instance, cold chain custody forms, or any other type of additional paperwork that may be required. One of my customers requires that their cold chain custody form, for instance, be completed. I let the dispatcher know when they book the load with me that this needs to be done. I send them the confirmation, bill of lading, and then the CCC form. And then this all needs to be turned in within 24 hours of the load being delivered, or because I have to turn this into the customer. Otherwise, there's another big deduction, and it's like $250 a day for every day that it's not turned in, right? So obviously I don't want to take a hit on it, and I don't want you guys to either. And so I make sure that everything is spelled out in, big bold letters basically. And then, when I forward over like these cold chain custody forms or, any other type of form, I'm just kind of using this, that particular one for instance, because it seems to be the most recent one I've had lately. They're not getting filled out and they're not questioning it. Well, I didn't know what that was. Okay, well, I did explain to you over the phone that I'd be sending that over, and if you received a form, a document that you weren't familiar with, why wouldn't you question that? Right? That lack of follow through is on your end, and not having that turned in is like a $500 deduction. And a lot of these loads from this customer are short runs. They're not all from one end of the U.S. to the other or something, you know what I mean? And so, that might be a $1,600 to $100 to a $2,000 load. You start looking at $500 for not having the form completed. You don't turn your paperwork in on time. That's $250 a day. Maybe you don't get it turned in for 3 or 4 days. Before you know it, you're burned up. You just ran that load basically for free, right? And it's not fair. It's not right, but it is what it is. Check calls are another thing. Find out whose responsibility it is for check calls. And regardless of whose responsibility it is, make sure that you're staying in communication. Now, I understand that some brokerages kind of like to, blow drivers up, on the phone. They've got, MacroPoint or, whatever, any of the other trackers out there. In addition to that, they're calling them every half an hour to an hour, and I find that more often than not with some of the bigger box brokerages, because I think that, because they've got different staff coming in at different times and things. And so you've got, one shift basically kind of taking over, following up on this load. And to you drivers especially, it gets very, very frustrating, right? For other brokers, some, small to medium-sized brokers, they're not going to call and harass you all the time. They may or may not require the macro point, but you need to accept it if it does. I know that I had a load that required macro point not that long ago, and I got the driver's phone number. I didn't really check it ahead of time. It was kind of my bad on my end. But the drivers, they actually had the old flip phones, like it was the year 2000 or something. And so obviously, there was no way for them to accept that. I got my butt chewed by the customer because it was a requirement, and I took the hit on that. That was my bad. But yeah, if it's a load that doesn't require, one of the trackings or anything, a lot of times, brokers require at least 1 or 2 calls a day, an AM and a PM, or they'll, if they reach out to you, they're going to need a response, right? You can't just blow that off. Otherwise, they can hit you with like $100, $200 a day fee. And there again, this is all spelled out. Now, you might get to a pickup and the customer says, hey, here's my cell phone, check in with me. And you're thinking, oh, okay, you're checking with the customer, not with the broker. All right. Your contract, your agreement is not with that shipper. Your contract or agreement, that rate confirmation, that's a legally binding document, right, is with your broker. So you doing check calls directly with the shipper, your broker probably doesn't know that, right, unless your customer's letting them know. And so they're going to hit you with the fine regardless. So these are all things, and I bring all of this, I've been meaning to kind of do this video for quite some time, but I bring all of these kinds of things up because for those of you that have been in the industry for a while and understand the market, that there's like an ebb and a flow to everything, right? I talk about ebb and flow. And so right now the market's good. We're in a bit of a low capacity. Rates are good for carriers right now, right? At least in most lanes. I'm seeing some really decent pay coming out of Florida, as it typically, tends to be historically during produce season. Produce season starting, but anywho, I just lost my train of thought. I apologize. I've got a little bit of a headache today, and I really wanted to talk about this. Maybe I should have picked a better time for it. But these are all things that when the market's down and rates are down, maybe everything kind of plummets, and getting $1.90, $2 a mile is a good rate. You know what I mean? These $3 to $5, $6 a mile lanes just don't exist anymore. Right? We kind of saw the same thing happen, for those of you that remember, when the ELD mandate went into effect in 2018. What happened? Capacity fell off, rates went up. Well, there was a lot of you that maybe were company drivers. You went out and got your own authority. Maybe owner-operators took that as an opportunity to, add an additional truck, 2 or 3, whatever. And then what happened was we ended up basically in an overcapacity, right? And there wasn't there were points where maybe all of the freight wasn't always there, right? It had kind of slacked off a little bit. And so we went into basically 2019 with some mixed results, right, as a result of that. And some of the lanes during 2019 were just absolutely horrendous. They were astonishingly low, if we were to look at the spot market. So everybody kind of looked at 2020 as, sort of that turnaround time, right? It was at least we were all looking at things kind of picking up a little bit, and rates kind of coming back on point to where they should be. Maybe not exceptionally high, but they weren't going to be so low and so bad for you carriers and drivers out there. And then what happened? COVID hit, right? The pandemic hit. Companies closed up shop. I know about 70% of my book of business as a broker basically kind of dried up, at least temporarily. And things just were not, they were not well, right? I chuckle about it now, but it was a rough go there, I think, for a lot of people. We saw layoffs on the brokerage side, or just flat out, you're gone, from like a lot of the big box brokerages, and things like that. And then now we're basically, everybody's hiring drivers, right? So at some point, that's all going to catch up, and rates will eventually taper off. If they tank or drop to like the levels that they were in 2019, for instance, this is where like having a really good relationship with your broker that you can trust, obviously, will come into play, because I know, at least for myself personally, and I know other brokers that I talk to, they take care of their regular drivers even when rates are down, right? And those are things, and they go to bat for them. If they have an option between using you or someone off the load board, they typically don't have a problem paying you a little bit more, because you know them, their freight, their customers' requirements and things, right? A lot of times it's kind of like a blind first date when you're using a new carrier off the load board. You really don't know, right? And there again, all of this goes into play with reading your rate confirmations. It's not like you're going to have to read a novel or anything, a 500-page novel. It's typically 1 or 2 pages, but there's things in there that you want to look out for that can really, really hurt you at the end. And then there's this big shocker, and I tend to, I usually, if I haven't, had any communication from a driver or a carrier, and I've tried to check in with them, I'll send them a text message or an email, or leave them a voicemail and say, hey, look, you need to pay attention to your rate confirmation, and make sure that these things are being done. Otherwise these fees are going to kind of fall into place. I kind of give them that reminder, right? Or at least I try to. Sometimes they just flat out just don't do anything. They don't sign their confirmations on time. They don't, it's very, very simple things that take just literally a moment that can save you hundreds and hundreds, if not sometimes thousands of dollars, right? And so I bring all of this up because even though rates are high right now, and some of those deductions might not hurt you quite as severely, when the market, when we start to kind of come over that crest, and rates kind of come down, these are things that you're really going to want to pay attention to. And so yeah, building those really good relationships with your brokers now, even though the market's up and I know that, it's everybody, a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to chase that high dollar freight, off the board and everything, it's maybe paying $300 to $500 more than, somebody else. But if it's maybe a broker, an unscrupulous broker out there that's just going to basically hit you with fees and fines. I know that there's a broker, and I'm not going to name names, but they worked for the same customer as I did, and they would post their loads out on DAT for anywhere from, say, $300 to $1,000 more than what the customer was paying. What happened was because I talked to a lot of these drivers after the fact, because they ended up booking loads with me the following week or the following few days later, maybe on the same lane. But what happened was that they'll either call them and say, we don't have that load available anymore, or that particular one, but I do have this other one. It's a little bit less. They'll try to play that whole trick, that thing, or they'll end up hitting them with these ridiculous deductions because they're, number one, not expecting you to read your rate confirmation, right? Or they've got some other little snafu up their sleeve. I'm sure that there's new ones all the time. I haven't heard them all, but, they're out there. So these are all things that you should all be aware of, like I said. But if you find a good broker that takes care of you, you take care of them, you will be successful, right? You won't run into those. The hard times, the low points won't hit you as severely as they would otherwise. I've got a couple of drivers that I work with, and I've got a customer. They really never really send me over rates or anything, or at least typically they don't. I try to find out what their target rate is on things, but they're kind of like all over the place. But I remember driver Tom, he called me and he says, well, what are you looking to get that done for? And I said, honestly, I don't know. Same customer, they never tell me. I said, what do you think you need on something like this? And on that particular lane, I think he'd asked for like $1,300. It was a short run. And so I went back to the customer and I said, hey, what's your target rate on this? Their target rate was 17, right? So I could have said, hey, I got you that 13. I'll go ahead and get that typed up, and I'll get that confirmation rate over to you. But I didn't, because Tom runs for me fairly frequently. We know each other. We've talked on the phone, about different concerns and things like this, and within the industry. But I actually went back to Tom and I said, well, how does 1550 grab you? Or maybe it was 15 or 1550. And I told him exactly what the customer was paying me. And he said, perfect. He was very happy with it. But I very easily could have said, oh, Tom, customer's paying 14. I could have BS'd a little bit, but I don't. I know there's probably quite a few brokers out there that do. There's others that won't. But there again, build your relationships with your brokers, regardless of what the market's doing, whether it's up or it's down. And there again, like I said, this will all kind of help you in the long run. And I know I'm getting a little long-winded here, guys. But definitely pay attention to your paperwork. If you get some sort of form or document or something in addition to your rate confirmation or the bill of lading or both, and you're not familiar with it, question it. What is this for? What do I need to do? Read your confirmation. Because a lot of times it's not just the standard stuff that's on there. Your broker or your broker agent will add in additional notes that need to be addressed on that load. And sometimes, it might come down to you making a 100-mile deadhead to go pick up this load, and load needed 6-foot drops, and you that's what you have, but in the notes it said 8-foot drops required. That was maybe a snafu, whatever, the broker's fault, an oversight, whatever, and then you show up and that you can't load because you don't have 8-foot drops. You've only got 6s or 4s, or whatever the case may be. Another thing, and I see this come through the Facebook group. I get calls on this from other carriers, messages and things, is that if you pick up a load, and let's say it's the end of the day, you're the last one there, they're closing up, and you go and scale and you're overweight or there's some sort of an issue with the load, don't go anywhere. Not until that customer either opens back up and adjust your load to make it right, or whatever the scenario may be, or and you maybe get a new rate confirmation for detention, because now if that customer doesn't open up and let's say they close at 5, you get there 4:30, you get out of there at 5:30, you got your paperwork, they're closed, you go scale, and try to go back, and there's nobody there. Nobody's going to help you. I mean, just don't move. Now, to some of you that might seem like a no-brainer, but I have gotten calls on this. Hey Tim, what should I do? Should I just risk it? It's it's only a few 100 miles or whatever. I don't care if it's a quarter mile. Don't do it. At least get your layover. But yeah, if there's a problem with a load, if your broker's ducking you, not answering your calls or anything because he's figuring you've already got it on your truck, you just got to deal with it now. No, you don't. Take it back. Tell him to get it off your truck. Either that, or he's got to get you a new rate confirmation and make things right. In which case, he's probably going to go back to his customer and say, hey, what happened? And they'll, more than likely maybe make it some sort of compensation. But I've also had some shippers try to pull some sneaky stuff on me before, because I always try to detail everything out for drivers, regardless of whether it's a first time working with them or I've worked with them for years, right? But I've had some customers, and they try to, overload or whatever, but, or this isn't what they said it was. The pallets are in shambles, things like this. A lot of times my driver will call me, whoever it might be, and just say, hey, Tim, we got a problem, man. What's going on? And I'm like, well, what's up? And they'll explain it to me, and I'll tell a customer flat out. In fact, I think I mentioned here in one of my previous videos that here not that long ago, I've actually quit working with a couple of clients because they weren't being on the up and up with what their load was, right? And I'm not gonna send a driver in there, have them upset, run into other kinds of issues, because it eats up time. It eats up my time. It's a headache. my driver headache. It's not any kind of a way to build relationships, right? And I value my carrier relationships as much as I value my customer relationships, if not more, with my carrier relationships, because I can always get more customers. I'm fairly decent at getting customers, so that's not really a big issue to me. I mean, I do value them, absolutely, but if there's a problem, with the customer, I have no problem just saying, hey, I'm sorry, I just don't think we can work together, because that what you sent me, what you told me this load is not what it is, obviously. And I've gotten pictures from drivers before, and things like this. And, they kind of, I don't know, maybe they dealt with brokers in the past that just, we'll take care of it. And they just expect the drivers to deal with it. And I think that's where kind of some of the whole us against them sort of thing sometimes, comes about. But to me, we're kind of all in this together, right? And it shouldn't be an us versus them. And the more that we understand about each other, some of our, difficulties, challenges, things that we face, I think gives us a greater understanding. And, we build some really solid relationships there. And when new opportunities arise, who am I going to give it to? Well, obviously, I'm going to give it to one of my regulars. Maybe I've picked up another customer with running very similar or the same lanes, but maybe it's some really great easy freight that's paying an extra 75 cents a dollar a mile or something. I'm not going to give that to somebody I just plucked off a DAT that I don't know. So okay, guys, I know I got a little long-winded with some of that, got maybe a little bit preachy. I apologize. If you haven't been to the website yet, if you guys are looking for anything, we've got the Freight Broker Resources website, which I don't have that pulled up, but maybe you're a new or aspiring truck driver. We've got a list of schools in all the states. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. If you're looking for factoring, if you need a TMS, if you like reading about what's happening in the industry, there's trucking news there. There's a classified section. There's insurance providers, trucking associations, government agencies, and some health tips for you guys, right? We all want to see everybody stay healthy and do well. If you guys have any suggestions for future videos or something that you would like to see me add to the website or anything like that, by all means, let me know. You can always reach me through the website or comment down below. Guys, hey, I appreciate you watching, and I look forward to doing more of these videos for you guys. Without you, I wouldn't be here doing these. And with that, I will say ta-ta. Bye now.